The Joe Rogan Experience.
So in 2020, you have this revelation. You recognize where this is going. You see how it charts, and you say, this is going to be a real problem. Does anybody listen to you? This is where the problem comes, right?
Yeah, like we said, right? You can draw a straight line. You can have people nodding along, but there's a couple of like hiccups along the way. One, is that straight line really going to happen? All you're doing is like drawing lines on charts, right? I don't really believe that that's going to happen, and that's one thing. The next thing is just imagining, is this what's going to come to pass as a result of that? And then the third thing is, well, yeah, that sounds important, but like not my problem. Like that sounds like an important problem for somebody else. And so we did do bit of a traveling.
Yeah, it was like the world's saddest traveling roadshow. Like it was literally as dumb as this sounds. So we go and oh my God, I mean, it's almost embarrassing to think back on. But so 2020 happens. Yes, within months. First of all, we're like, we got to figure out how to hand off our company. So we handed it off to two of our earliest employees. They did an amazing job. Company exited. That's great. But that was only because they're so good at what they do. We then went, what the hell? Like, how can you steer this situation? We just thought we got to wake up the U.S. government. As stupid and naive as that sounds, like that was the big picture goal. So we start to line up as many briefings as we possibly can across the U.S. interagency, all the departments, all the agencies that we can find, climbing our way up. We got an awful lot, like Ed said, of like, that sounds like a wicked important problem for somebody else to solve.
Yeah, like defense, Homeland Security, and then the State Department.
Yeah, so we end up exactly in this meeting with like, there's about a dozen folks from the State Department. And one of them, and I hope at some point, history recognizes what she did and her team did. Because it was the first time that somebody actually stood up and said, first of all, yes, sounds like a serious issue. I see the argument, makes sense. 2, I own this. And 3, I'm going to put my own career capital behind this.
And that was at the end of 2021. So imagine that. That's a year before ChatGPT. Nobody was tracking this issue. You had to have the imagination to draw like through that line, understand what it meant, and then believe, yeah, I'm going to risk some career capital on this in a risk-averse government.
And this is the only reason that we even were able to publicly talk about the investigation in the first place, because by the time this whole assessment was commissioned, it was just before ChatGPT came out. The Eye of Sauron was not yet on this. And so there was a view that like, yeah, sure, you can publish the results of this kind of, not nothing burger investigation, but, you can, sure, go ahead. And it just became this insane story. We had like the UK AI Safety Summit. We had the White House executive order, all this stuff, which became entangled with the work we were doing, which we simply could not have, especially some of the reports we were collecting from the labs, the whistleblower reports, that could not have been made public if it wasn't for the foresight of this team really pushing for as well the American population to hear about it.
Now, I could see how if you were one of the people that's on this expansion-minded mindset, like all you're thinking about is like getting this up and running, you guys are a pain in the ass, right? So you guys, you're obviously you're doing something really ridiculous. You're stopping your company. You could make more money staying there and continuing the process, but you recognize that there's like an existential threat involved in making this stuff go online. Like when this stuff is live, you can't undo it.
Oh yeah, I mean like no matter how much money you're making, the dumbest thing to do is to stand by as something that completely transcends money is being developed, and it's just going to screw you over if things go badly, right?
My point is like, are there people that push back against this, and what is their argument?
Yeah, so actually, and I'll let you follow up on the first story of the pushback. I think it's kind of it's been in the news a little bit lately now, getting more and more public. But when we started this, and like no one was talking about it, the one group that was actually pushing sort of stuff in this space was a big funder in the area of like effective altruism. I think you may have heard of them. This is kind of a Silicon Valley group of people who have a certain mindset about how you pick tough problems to work on, valuable problems to work on. They've had all kinds of issues. Sam Bankman-Fried was one of them, and all that quite famously. So we're not effective altruists, but because these are the folks who are working in the space, we decided, well, we'll talk to them. And the first thing they told us was, don't talk to the government about this. Their position was, if you bring this to the attention of the government, they will go, oh shit, powerful AI systems, and they're not going to hear about the dangers, so they're going to somehow go out and build the powerful systems without caring about the risk side, which when you're like in that startup mindset, you want to fail cheap. Like you don't want to just like make assumptions about the world and be like, okay, let's not touch it. So our instinct was, okay, let's just test this a little bit and like talk to a couple people, see how they respond, tweak the message, like kind of keep climbing that ladder. That's the kind of, builder mindset that we came from in Silicon Valley. And we found that people are way more thoughtful about this than you would imagine. And
in DoD especially, DoD has a very safety-oriented culture with their tech. Like the thing is, because like their stuff like kills people, right? And they know their stuff kills people, and so they have an entire safety-oriented development practice to make sure that their stuff doesn't like go off the rails. And so you can actually bring up these concerns with them, and it lands in kind of a ready culture. But one of the issues with the individuals we spoke to who were saying don't talk to government is that they had just not actually interacted with any of the folks that they were kind of talking about and imagining that they knew what was in their heads. And so they were just giving, incorrect advice. And frankly, like, so we work with DoD now on, actually deploying AI systems in a way that's safe and secure. And the truth is, at the time when we got that advice, which was like late 2020, reality is you could have made it your life's mission to try to get the Department of Defense to build an AGI, and like you would not have succeeded because nobody was paying attention.
Wow. Because they just didn't know.
Yeah, there's a chasm, right? There's a gap to cross. Like there's information. There's information spaces that DoD folks like operate in and work in. There's information spaces that Silicon Valley and tech operated in. They're a little more convergent today, but especially at the time they were very separate. And so the briefings we did, we had to constantly, iterate on like clarity, making it very kind of clear and explaining it and all that stuff. Years it took.
And that was the piece to your question about like the pushback from, in a way, from inside the house. Like that was the people who cared about the risk.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, like when we actually went into the labs. So some labs, not all labs are created equal. We should make that point. When you talk to whistleblowers, what we found was there's one lab that's like really great. So Anthropic, when you talk to people there, you don't have the sense that you're talking to a whistleblower who's nervous about telling you whatever. Roughly speaking, what the executives say to the public is aligned with what their researchers say. It's all very, very open.
More closely, I think, than any of the others.
Yeah. More closely than any of the others. Always, there are always variations here and there. But some of the other labs, like, very different story. And you had the sense, like, we were in a room with one of the frontier labs. We were talking to their leadership. This is part of the investigation. And there was somebody from anyway, it won't be too specific, but there was somebody in the room who then took us aside after, and he hands me his phone. He's like, "Hey, can you please like put your phone number in?" Can you please put?
Yeah.
Or no, yeah. He put his number in my phone, and then he kind of like whispered to me. He's like, "Hey, so whatever recommendations you guys are going to make, I would urge you to be more ambitious." And I was like, what does that mean? He's like, can we just talk later? So, as happened in many, many cases, we had a lot of cases where we set up bar meetups after the fact, where we would talk to these folks and get them in an informal setting. He shared some pretty sobering stuff, and in particular, the fact that he did not have confidence in his lab's leadership to live up to their publicly stated word on what they would do when they were approaching AGI, and even now to secure and make these systems safe. So many such cases, this is like kind of one specific example, but it's not that you ever had like lab leadership come in or doors getting kicked down and people are waking us up in the middle of the night. It was that you had this looming cloud over everybody that you really felt some of the people with the most access and information who understood the problem the most deeply were the most hesitant to bring things forward because they sort of understood that their lab's not going to be happy with this.
And so it's very hard to also get an extremely broad view of this from inside the labs because, you open it up, you start to talk to, we spoke to like a couple of dozen people about various issues in total. You go much further than that and, word starts to get around. And so we had to kind of strike that balance as we spoke to folks from each of these labs.
Now, when you say approaching AGI, how does one know when a system has achieved AGI, and does the system have an obligation to alert you?
Well, by the Turing test, right?
Yes.
So you have a conversation with a machine and it can fool you into thinking that it's a human. That was the bar for AGI for, a few decades.
That's kind of already happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Or close to it.
yeah.
4.0 is close to it, or 4.0.
Different forms of the Turing test have been passed, different forms have been proposed, and there is a feeling among a lot of people that goalposts are being shifted. Now, the definition of AGI itself is kind of interesting, right? Because we're not necessarily fans of the term, because usually when people talk about AGI, they're talking about a specific circumstance in which there are capabilities they care about. So some people use AGI to refer to the wholesale automation of all labor, right? That's one. Some people say, well, when you build AGI, it's automatically going to be hard to control and there's a risk to civilization, so that's a different threshold. And so all these different ways of defining it, ultimately, it can be more useful to think sometimes about advanced AI and the different thresholds of capability you cross and the implications of those capabilities. But it is probably going to be more like a fuzzy spectrum, which in a way makes it harder, right? Because it would be great to have like a
tripwire where you're like,
Yeah.
oh, like this is bad. Okay, like we got to do something. But because there's no threshold that we can like really put our fingers on, we're like a frog in boiling water in some sense, where it's like, oh, like just gets a little better. Oh, like we're still fine. And not just we're still fine, but as the system improves below that threshold, life gets better and better. These are incredibly valuable, beneficial systems. We do roll stuff out like this, again, at DoD and various customers, and it's massively valuable. It allows you to accelerate all kinds of, back office, like paperwork BS. It allows you to do all sorts of wonderful things. And our expectation is that's going to keep happening until it suddenly doesn't.
Yeah, one of the things that there was a guy we were talking to from one of the labs, and he was saying, look, the temptation to like put a heavier foot on the pedal is going to be greatest just as the risk is greatest, because that's, it's dual use technology, right? Every positive capability increasingly starts to introduce basically a situation where the destructive footprint of malicious actors who weaponize the system, or just of the system itself, just grows and grows and grows. So you can't really have one without the other. The question is always, how do you balance those things? But in terms of defining AI, it's a challenging thing.
Yeah, that's something that one of our friends at the lab pointed out. The closer we get to that point, the more the temptation will be to hand these systems the keys to our data center, because they can do such a better job of managing those resources and assets.
And if we
than
don't do it,
can.
Google will. And if they don't
Bingo.
do it, Microsoft will. Like the competition, the competitive dynamics are a really big part of this issue.
Yes,
So there's just a mad race to who knows what.
exactly.
Yeah. That's actually the best summary I've heard. I mean, like no one knows what the magic threshold. These things keep getting smarter. So we might as well keep turning that crank. And as long as scaling works, right, we have a knob, a dial, we can just tune and we get more IQ points out.
What, from your understanding of the current landscape, how far away are we looking at something being implemented where the whole world changes?
Arguably, the whole world is already changing as a result of this technology. The U.S. government is in the process of task organizing around various risk sets for this. That takes time. The private sector is reorganizing. Like OpenAI will roll out an update that obliterates the jobs of illustrators from one day to the next, obliterates the jobs of translators from one day to the next. This is probably net beneficial for society because we can get so much more art and so much more translation done. But is the world already being changed as a result of this? Yeah, absolutely. Geopolitically, economically, industrially, yeah.
Of course, it's like not to say anything about the value, the purpose that people lose from that, right? So the kind of there's the economic benefit, but there's like the social, cultural hit that we take too.
Right, and then there's the implementation of universal basic income, which keeps getting discussed in regards to this. We asked Chat GPT 4.0 the other day in the green room. We were like, are you going to replace people? Like, what will people do for money? And then, well, universal basic income will have to be considered. Well, you don't want a bunch of people just on the dole working for the fucking Skynet.
Yeah.
You know, because that's kind of what it is.
I mean, one of the challenges is like so much of this is untested, and we don't know how to even roll that out.